Hello, my name is Stephen Magianis, and I'm going to be talking about the Wilderness Act. Wilderness areas provide habitat for wildlife and havens for threatened species, filter and clean the air we breathe, protect watershed and provide clean drinking water to communities, boost nearby economies with tourism and recreation dollars, provide outstanding places to recreate and to escape the bustle of the modern world. Congress passed the 1964 Wilderness Act in order to preserve and protect certain lands in their natural condition and thus secure for present and future generations the benefit of wilderness. The act recognized the value of preserving an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. In 1980, the passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act added over 56 million acres of wilderness to the system, the largest addition in a single year. In 1984 marks the year in which most new wilderness areas were added. Congress therefore directed that designated wilderness areas shall be administered for the use and enjoyment of the American people in such manners as will leave them unimpaired for future use and enjoyment as wilderness, and so as to provide for the protection of these areas, the preservation of their wilderness character, and for gathering and dissemination of information regarding their use and enjoyment as wilderness. Zanister wrote the first draft of the Wilderness Act in 1956. In 1955, Zanister began an effort to convince skeptics and Congress to support a bill to establish a national wilderness preservation system. Drafts of a bill were circulated the next year and introduced in Congress by Representative John Saylor. He sought to rally public opinion through writing in the Living Wilderness and other publications, as well as organizing many talks to citizens groups across the country. Former Wilderness Society Executive Director Howard Zanister drafted the bill in 1956 to protect some of the nation's last remaining wilderness. By 1955, Zanister had grown disillusioned with piecemeal attempts at preservation. Let us be done with a wilderness preservation system program made up of a sequence of overlapping emergencies, threats, and defensive campaigns, he said. He sat down and composed the first draft of what later became the Wilderness Act. After 8 years and 66 revisions, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Wilderness Act into law on September 3, 1964. Sadly, Zanister died 4 months earlier. He was not able to see his dream signed into action, but the legacy he left will be enjoyed by Americans for generations to come. The Wilderness Act designated 9.1 million acres as wilderness and laid out a long-term study process for additional designations. The additional designation process begins when the federal agencies study lands already under their jurisdiction and identify potential wilderness areas. The President then makes a recommendation to Congress on additional wilderness designations, in response to which Congress can designate the identified lands as wilderness, release the lands from wilderness designation, or take no action on the recommendation. Once designated, the areas must be managed to preserve their wilderness character. Except as specifically provided for in this Act and subject to existing private rights, there shall be no commercial enterprise and no permanent road within any wilderness area designated by this Act, and except as necessary to meet minimum requirements for the administration of the area, and for the purpose of this Act, including measures required in emergencies involving health and safety of persons within the area, there shall be no temporary road, no use of motor vehicles, motorized equipment, or motorboats, no landing of aircraft, and no other form of mechanized transport, and no structure or installation within any such area. As of June 2007, about 43 million acres of park system and about 21 million acres of national wildlife refuge system were designated as wilderness. The National Park Service is responsible for preserving the wilderness character of these areas. Challenges brought under the Wilderness Act generally involve claims that the National Park Service authorized an action that fails to maintain the wilderness character of the land within the national park system. The smallest wilderness area in the National Wilderness Preservation System is the 5.5 acres of Pelican Island Wilderness in Florida. This wilderness area is managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The waters surrounding Pelican Island provide abundant food for the area's wading birds who nest on the wilderness island, including great blue herons, white ibis, anahangas, and oyster catchers. The largest wilderness area in the National Wilderness Preservation System is the Wrangley St. Elias Wilderness, protecting more than 9 million acres of Alaska tundra and boreal forests. This NPS-managed wilderness area is home to many different animals, including Doll, sheep, grizzly bear, caribou, wolves, and wolverines. Overall, however, only about 5% of the entire United States, an area slightly larger than the state of California, is protected as wilderness. Because Alaska contains just over half of American wilderness, only about 2.7% of the contiguous United States, an area about the size of Minnesota, is protected as wilderness. There are two agencies on this page that manage the wilderness. There's the Bureau of Land Management and the Fish and Wildlife, both part of the Department of Interior. On this page, you have the Forest Service, which is managed by the Department of Agriculture, and the National Park Service, which is also part of the Department of Interior. There's a picture of wilderness. Another picture of wilderness. And here are my sources.